Hello everybody and welcome to day 2 of UCU's Industrial Action. Our members in 10 universities across Scotland, along with 58 universities across the UK, have been taking industrial action yesterday, today, and action plan for tomorrow in 2 bitter strikes over cuts to pensions and over pay and working conditions. And we're really delighted to have so many people joining us in this online strike rally this lunchtime. First of all, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's managed to come because of our decision to shift this Holyrood rally online. The UCU Scotland officers met on Monday and we were hearing the news of the new variant, and given the union has put safety first throughout this pandemic, there was a clear decision that we should move our rally online, and we do hope that it means more people can join us this lunchtime. I'm also pleased that all of our speakers who were going to be standing in the cold outside the Scottish Parliament are actually here with us today. So why are we on strike? Well, I think we all know that our university sector is world class. We provide vital education to students. We provide economic development and helping the economic recovery, research, and we also have seen how our sector has provided such excellent COVID expertise during the pandemic. But this is on the back of swinging cuts to pensions. It's on the back of depressing staff pay in the sector. It's on the back of unsafe workloads and the exploitation of thousands of staff on precarious contracts and pay inequality for women, Black and minority ethnic staff and disabled colleagues. Our members are at breaking point, and so that's why they're on strike today. Now, I'm going to hand over now to our first speaker, and our first speaker is Lena Vongren, and Lena is the UCU Scotland president. I should also say that Lena's no stranger to insecure working. So, Lena, thanks for joining us today, and I'll pass over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. And thank you, everyone who is here rallying. If we were kind of outside, we would shout together, but I guess you'll have to shout at home in front of your device, and that will be loud enough. So, yes, I was telling Mary earlier that I came from the picket line not long ago, so I'm still kind of in picket mode. I even have some nice posters that I brought home with me that I'll take tomorrow as well. I thought that I would talk about some of the issues that we are striking over. And I think I would like to talk about exhaustion, that is to say extreme tiredness. And I would like to talk about insecurity. And I would like to talk about inequality. And then finally, I think I'd like to talk about what this does to education, because that's what we're here for. So we are striking over pensions. We are also striking over fair pay and fair working conditions and equality in our universities. Now, I haven't had time to prepare proper notes or anything like that for this talk because I am exhausted. I am absolutely exhausted. And I bet you that the majority of my colleagues in universities are absolutely exhausted. It is not normal to be in a constant state of exhaustion, but that's where we're at. So I have colleagues who are working 50, 60 hours a week, who are falling ill, who are being put into situations in which they are sleeping in their offices. They are staying up all night marking and then going to deliver lectures. It's not sustainable, it's not normal, it causes people to fall ill. So we are exhausted and we are therefore striking. For example, one of the things we're striking over is some kind of measures to make sure our workload is not as intense as it currently is, because it is not sustainable. People are falling ill. The second thing I wanted to talk about is insecurity. And as Mary mentioned, I'm not a stranger to insecurity. After a while I stopped counting, but I did a count yesterday, and I think in the last 8 years I've been on 18 different contracts, various fixed term contracts, various hourly contracts, one-off payments that are ripe in academia. And I am still one of the more secure ones. I have one colleague who is currently pregnant for the second time, who's working in 3 different workplaces. I have colleagues who go without any contract at all for several months. And I will say what this does to you when you are in this kind of insecure position, it doesn't just affect one area of your life. It's not just as if that insecurity that you feel in terms of contracts or finance stays there. It moves into every area of your life. It affects your health, physical health, mental health. It affects how you plan your life. It affects your relationships with other people. It affects where you live or where you don't live. Because if I don't know where I'm working next month, I don't know where I will be living in next month. You are always applying for jobs. So exhaustion, inequality, and insecurity. I want to highlight that because both of these things, I think everyone is exhausted, but people with other caring responsibilities, people who are already doing extra work, such as pastoral care and kind of various volunteer work in terms of equality, diversity, inclusion, and so on, these people are even more burdened by the high workload. And we have it on kind of looking at higher education statistics agency numbers. We know that you are more likely to be on an insecure contract if you are Black, Asian, minority ethnic, if you are a woman. So according to 2019 figures, if you are a Black worker, you are twice as likely as a white worker to be on a 0 hours contract, for example. So all these things come together. And in casework, when I help individual members, I help members who are on insecure contracts trying to get some kind of security, but also so many people who are simply falling ill, disabled people, women, disabled women who are being forced out of the profession because it is not sustainable to work for 10 years on insecure contracts, working 50 hours a week. So what do these things do to our profession? I thought I would share this one. This is a very nice little banner made by a local rep at Edinburgh University, Marta. And it says, "My working conditions are the student experience." Despite how hard we work and despite how hard we try to not burden our students with the kind of these working conditions, or the fact that you haven't slept during the night and still are delivering a lecture, we try not to burden students, and we try to do our best, and we do an amazing job. But it will affect the student experience. It will affect education, it will affect research, it affects all of it, all of what we do. So the university, I would like to finish with saying this, the university is not made up of fancy buildings. That's not what a university is. The university is made up of staff, students, all of us, the education we create together, the research we create together, the fantastic ideas that we create together. Lecturers, tutors, academic services, professional services, library staff, all of us together make up what the university is. And we have to value that, and we have to fund that. So I'm really grateful to everyone here supporting our strike, and I will see you tomorrow on the picket line. One more day.
Thank you so much, Lena. We've really appreciated your leadership of UCU Scotland at this time. I'm pleased now to move on to our political speakers. And our first speaker is Corcab Stewart, MSP. Corcab is speaking from the Scottish National Party. She's Deputy Convener of the Education, Children and Young People Committee. And I remember Corcab quite a long time ago when I worked for the STUC and you were involved in the STUC Black Workers Committee. So really good to have your support here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, when I look back, actually, I think I was the convener or the vice convener of the Black Workers Committee in the second year, and I know that it celebrated its 25th anniversary just this year. Thank you so much for inviting me to say a few words to you today. As a teacher for many, many years, I have a deep value and appreciation of education and all the amazing staff that not only educate but inspire every day. However, I know that warm words are not enough, and I fully support the principles of fair work being put into practice to enable good outcomes for all. As the MSP for Glasgow Kelvin, a constituency that actually has 4 institutes of higher education, I'm only too well aware of the fantastic work of lecturers. Also, as a lifelong, as Mary pointed out, as a lifelong trade union member, and I've previously been a workplace representative as well, I recognise and applaud and value the role of trade unions in representing their members. I do recognise the serious implications for all concerned in this dispute, the universities, the staff and students. And obviously I would urge both sides to get around the table and to work towards a resolution. I think we can all agree that we should be encouraging continued negotiations to be resolved and hopefully without the need for further industrial action, and for everyone to make an enormous effort to reach a settlement. Thank you, and my best wishes to everybody.
Thank you very much, Corcab. It's really important for us to have your support here today and the support of the SNP generally for our dispute. So thank you. Without further ado, I'm going to move on to our next political speaker, who's been at our previous rallies at Holyrood and online too, I think. So I'm pleased to welcome Ross Greer, MSP, from the Scottish Greens. Ross is the Scottish Greens spokesperson for education. So thank you for joining us today, Ross, and I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Mary. And yeah, as you say, I'm no stranger to these rallies. I was reflecting today, though, on the difference between this one online, sitting in my office, from one that we had on exactly this issue around the pension scheme in 2018, on the day that the beast from the east arrived, as we stood outside Parliament. I think we were standing there as it moved from an amber weather warning to a red weather warning. So as much as I miss seeing you all in person, I definitely appreciate the relative warmth provided my office now compared to that day a couple of years ago. First of all, I just want to congratulate you all for actually passing the ballot thresholds to take this industrial action. These thresholds, part of the Tories' anti-trade union bill, are designed to stop industrial action. They're designed to stop you from exercising the greatest power that you have as a workforce, which is to withdraw your labour. And in many cases, in many institutions, you absolutely smashed those thresholds to be able to take this action. So congratulations from everyone at the Scottish Greens, particularly to your branch reps and the organisers who made sure to push up that turnout so that this action could take place. Education unions like the UCU and like EIS FILA and the college sector have proven the value of an organised workers' movement time and time again in recent years. You are demonstrating to other workers in other sectors the value of joining a union, the value of collective action by workers. And I mean, yet again, it feels like we're saying the same things over again, because university management are still locked in the same pattern of behaviour that they have been for years now. I noticed earlier this week, I think it was at a Universities UK press conference, that one of the vice principals said in response to this action, we've been able to cope with 0% of staff coming on campus during the pandemic, so I'm sure that we can cope with this. Well, they can't cope with this. This is why you're going to win. They're never going to be able to cope with this. There's a massive difference between you all working from home and still working the same unpaid overtime, the same unsustainable hours, and taking this action. Not only can they not cope with all-out industrial action and strikes, University management couldn't even cope with a work to rule. This is a sector that's held up by your unpaid overtime. That's why it's so important that not only the pension issue is resolved, but we finally get action on clear, secure contracts for the huge proportion of the workforce who are on insecure contracts, as Lena was saying earlier on, but contracts with the basis of a 35-hour working week as a starting point. Obviously, many of us want to see movement towards 4-day working week, etc. But just going back to the pension fund, I mean, we all know that the USS needs governance reform. I mean, there's no doubt that there's been mismanagement of this scheme, but huge cuts to your pensions are unacceptable and they're unnecessary. I mean, I remember us talking in 2018 about the need for a re-evaluation of the scheme, a change to the methodology, and then a re-evaluation of the scheme. But that is absolutely essential. A 2021 re-evaluation is absolutely essential given what's happened in recent years. And as I said, wider governance reform of how that pension scheme is actually managed. I just want to finish off, though, by giving our support to all the admin and the support staff who are involved in this as well. And my thanks, and thanks to the Scottish Greens, to the UCU for making sure that admin and support staff and their unions have their voices heard in this dispute as well. Too often the focus is on just one part of the workforce, but we know that you are taking this action as a united workforce across the university sector, because the issues of insecure contracts, of underpay, etc., these are cross-cutting issues for almost all staff at our universities. So you've got plenty of other speakers that you need to hear from. You don't need to hear any more from me. But once again, I just want to emphasise the solidarity of the Scottish Green Party and our congratulations for the strength of action so far.
Thank you so much, Ross. It's really good to have you with us here today and to have your solidarity in these disputes. I think Ross is absolutely right too about the impact this is having upon all staff in universities. Indeed, so many members of UCU are professional support staff too. It isn't just lecturers. We absolutely know that. I'm really pleased now to move on to our next speaker, another good friend of the trade union movement. Our next speaker is Michael Mara, MSP, and Michael is speaking on behalf of the Scottish Labour Party. He's the Shadow Cabinet Secretary for Education and Skills for Scottish Labour. So, Michael, I'm so pleased you could join us. Over to you.
Thanks, Mary. It's a real pleasure to be invited along and to be able to speak to you today. So obviously, speaking on my own part, but bringing you and all the members across Scotland and across the whole of the UK the best wishes of the Labour Party more generally, but in particular in the Scottish Parliament, with all the disputes that the four fights that you're undertaking at the moment. As other speakers have said, I mean, the fact that we're back here again, I think in this process is pretty much intolerable. This is the process particularly around the pensions dispute has gone on and on, going around in circles fighting the same action. I declare an interest in this. I have 15 years in the higher education sector, 15 years of contributions. So I know that colleagues out on picket lines this week are fighting for my pension as well, and I really appreciate that work that you're doing on behalf of people right across the sector, and then also for fighting alongside young, many of whom are young staff in precarious contracts who are looking to build a career, and being pretty clear that actually you can't do that on the basis of 0 hours contract. So our message to the employers is as clear as yours is. We have to see an evidence-based and objective valuation of the USS scheme. We need a pay deal that means there's no real terms pay cut that rewards the work that people have done, not just over the pandemic, but over many years. We need real solid action to phase out precarious contracts and that casualisation in the sector. And we do need action on the workload and unpaid work, which I think the pandemic has shone an even brighter light on those issues for people in the sector. And we know in Scotland that we have particular challenges. The unit of resource, as it's called, in terms of the money that universities have received, hasn't gone up for many, many years. And that was pushing, frankly, a business model in universities that is broken, particularly for many universities out with the ancients who just aren't bringing in the same cash. They've got business models that are precarious, but none of that excuses what's the approach that management across the UK are taking. Because I think at its core, this dispute isn't just about pensions, working conditions of staff. It's about the character and the future of higher education itself, and it's about who has the best interests of the sector at heart and the students at heart. And we know that that's you, we know that that's the lecturers, and we know that you're actually standing in solidarity with the people that you teach and that you work with. So, you have our support, and we'll continue to work with you in any way we can, and speaking to Mary and Murdo and the other officers across UCU, and helping in any way we can to put your case. Best wishes, and I hope that we all collectively can win this fight together.
Thanks so much, Michael. And I think you're spot on in terms of the broken business model in our university sector. We are a public service, we're a public education service, and it's important that we're seen and funded and supported to do that. Thank you, comrade. Really appreciate your solidarity today. I'm now really pleased to move on to our next speaker, also an MSP from the Scottish Parliament. Really delighted that Alex Cole-Hamilton MSP is with us today. Alex is the leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, and we're just delighted to have your support here, Alex, and I'll hand over to you, please.
Well, thank you very much, Mary. I'm going to echo a lot of what's been said already. I'm a fellow traveller here. I mean, I was weaned in the university sector. I'm the son of two academics, university lecturers, so I always understood the power imbalance that exists in our further and higher education institutions, particularly our higher education institutions. I was also served as president of Aberdeen Student Representative Council on Court and Senate, and stood side by side with both UCU and AUT in various industrial actions. So it's great to be back among you today. And it is striking that we are here once again. And as Ross Greer said, that you've achieved that threshold, that is to be congratulated. But it's necessary, because this dispute has been going on for 3 years, and we are, at many times, it doesn't feel like we are any further forward. I think it's really striking to me that we're facing battles on several fronts here. Casualisation of the workforce, the fact that at least a third of the workforce are insecure and unsafe contracts. The University of Edinburgh, which covers my constituency, some tutors have not been paid for nearly 4 months since they began teaching. That on top of that, there are unsafe workloads that you are being expected to do far more with less. You're spinning gold out of straw for what you're paid. And on average, we know that staff are performing 15 hours of unpaid work a week, by and large. I mean, that comes down to things like the ridiculous suggestion from particularly Edinburgh University that you can mark a 4,000-word essay in 30 minutes. That doesn't do you any favours. It certainly doesn't do credit to the students who've piled in the hours to perform that kind of coursework level. That then leads to poor mental health, and we're seeing an epidemic of poor mental health, not least, I mean, right across our society as a result of the pandemic, but particularly in the university sector. We've heard a lot about pay and pensions, and rightly so, because staff pay has fallen by 20% after 12 years of below inflation pay offers. And there is a 15% gender pay gap that still exists, a 17% ethnicity pay gap that still exists, and a 9% disability gap. And just to echo what's been said about pensions, I mean, we're effectively facing 35% cut in pensions. What kind of motivation or feeling of investment in people does that give our hardworking higher education workers? And these cuts are based on, I think, inappropriate valuations and false assumptions advertised by employers. So I'll just finish by saying you have the solidarity of the Scottish Liberal Democrats. I'm delighted to be among some friends again today, and we're with you.
Thank you so much, Alex. We've really appreciated your contribution today, and it's so good to know we have politicians in the Scottish Parliament with such a good understanding of the issues at stake in our dispute. So sincere thanks to you and your colleagues in the Scottish Liberal Democrats. We really appreciate your contribution this afternoon. And colleagues, it's so good to see so many people have joined us in this live stream via Facebook, via YouTube, via the live Twitter feed. So thanks to everybody for joining us. Before I go to our next speaker, who is Matt Crilly, I just wanted to note the many messages of solidarity that UCU Scotland has had. For example, from USDOR, the Shop Workers Union, from Tracy Gilbert, their Scottish Regional Secretary, has sent us a message of solidarity to our striking members, wishing us success in our action. We've also had fraternal greetings, sororal greetings from the EIS Union. I know Holly Patrick, the EIS ULA president, joined us on the picket lines at Edinburgh Napier yesterday, and she was able to participate in our live from the picket lines, which was great. We've had a strong message of support from EIS Assistant Secretary David Belsey. EIS is part of the same dispute and says that they have the common aim of obtaining fair pay and better working conditions for university staff. So thank you to EIS, and I'll hopefully cover some more of the solidarity messages we've had later on. But without further ado, I want to bring a really important speaker on now, and that is Matt Crilly. Matt is president of the National Union of Students in Scotland and has just been such a fantastic supporter of UCU, our members. I know in 2019-20 he was visiting the picket lines. We met up on Tuesday with NUS colleagues, and it was just so good to see you, and I'm delighted you're with us now, Matt. So on you go.
Hello, thank you so much for having me along today. I'm here to bring the solidarity on behalf of the National Union of Students to all academics, lecturers, trainers, administrators, computer staff, librarians, and of course the postgraduates that are on strike today. As a student, I'm here in solidarity as I've watched as postgrad researchers, students and academics suffer from horrendous precarious contracts, pay and exploitation. As a student, I'm here in solidarity today as I've seen class sizes get bigger and bigger whilst the same number of staff get more and more stressed. As a student, I'm here in solidarity today because I've seen my lecturers working late into the night and regularly responding to emails on a Saturday and a Sunday because clearly they're not given enough time to do it during the supposed working week. And as a student, I'm here in solidarity today because in 2021, there should be no pay gaps between men and women, between black staff and white staff. There should be no disability pay gap in a so-called progressive sector. And as a student, I'm in solidarity here today because I know that staff's working conditions are students' learning conditions, and that we have a shared interest in fighting against the marketisation of our universities and fighting for a democratic, lifelong, liberated education system. And yet, I still get asked sometimes by university bosses or journalists, how can you support the staff when ultimately the strike causes disruption to students' education? Well, for me, it's the failure of university bosses that brings the disruption to students today and the disruption to students every day. When they double the size of our classes but don't invest in more staff support, that represents a disruption to students' education. And when staff aren't given proper paid time to fully prepare for lessons, that represents a disruption to students' education. When 4 and 5 staff are struggling with their workload, that represents a disruption to my education, to students' education, because high quality, supportive education for students can only be delivered when staff are empowered and backed to deliver that education. Staff working conditions are students' learning conditions. And finally, as students, we are the lecturers, the librarians, and the university workers of the future. And in fighting to protect your jobs and the working conditions today, you're fighting for our jobs and working conditions of tomorrow. Your struggle is our struggle. And in fighting for your present, you're fighting for our future. So thank you for having me along today. Students and Staff United will never be defeated.
Thank you so much, Matt. You're spot on there. Solidarity, we're certainly stronger together as a staff and student body, and the support from you, from the NUS, from local students associations has been so invaluable to us. So we absolutely appreciate that, and we'll never take it for granted. Thank you. Before I go to our next speaker, I want to read out a couple of the other really helpful messages of solidarity that UCU has received over the past couple of days. First, from Unite the Union, had strong support across the piece from Unite's Further and Higher Education lead officer, from the Unite University of Glasgow branch, from your Dundee branch. We really value that solidarity. I guess the other message of solidarity we were really proud of was from the Glasgow GMB City Council branch. We saw our comrades in the City of Glasgow and their strike action during the COP campaigns. The message of support to us means a lot. So thank you, Glasgow GMB. I'll now go on to our next speaker, and again, really proud to have him speaking here. I'm really pleased to introduce a UCU member from our St Andrews branch, someone I think who isn't giving evidence today because he's on strike. So Professor Steve Riker, we're delighted that you're here with us today, and for all the support and advice you've given us over the past 20 months and beyond, but also in terms of our strike. So over to you, Steve.
Yeah, that's not giving evidence in court, I should say. I haven't done anything wrong. It was going to be giving evidence to one of the parliamentary committees around COVID. So, well, it's nicer to be outside, I think, than to be inside, even if it's virtually outside rather than physically outside. I've now been an academic for over 40 years. And when I started off in the early 1980s, I was told that, look, as an academic, your pay's all right. It's not particularly good compared to comparable professions. However, there are three things which make the academic job worthwhile. The first one is that you have good working conditions. You have security, which allows you to be critical, which allows you to say unconventional things and unpopular things and not risk your job. Fundamental to academic freedom. The second thing I was told was, look, you've got decent working hours. You've got time to think. You've got time to live. You've got time to have a hinterland of activities which feed into your academic activities. And I was told you have a decent pension so that when you stop working, you can retire in comfort. And over the years, I've seen each of those be destroyed. First of all, they came for our working conditions. They took away tenure, undermining academic freedom, and instead they gave us precarity, a situation where it's so hard to be critical, so hard to say things that are unpopular because will you get another job? It not only undermines our lives, it undermines our ability to do our job, to think new ideas, to say the things that are hard to be said, to be critical. Then they came for our working hours. And now, as we know, the notion that we have time to think, time to be with our families is a complete fallacy. In 2014 already, a survey showed that the average academic works something in the region of 61 hours a week. And that 80% of us have had our workload increased through the pandemic, getting to a point where we have no time to think. We don't have time to live. We don't have time to be with our families. The cost is not just for us, it's for those who are around us. And now they're coming for our pensions. Now, I'm at a stage in my career where my pension isn't going to be affected, but the notion that my junior colleagues, the PhD students that I'm supervising today or yesterday, will have half the pension that I have seems to me completely unacceptable. I have seen what for me was my dream job turn into a nightmare of a job, where only 11% of us, 1 in 10 of us, is satisfied with our job. Our profession has been all but destroyed. We are, as our slogan says, at breaking point. And so while, as I say, my pension is going to be okay, and while I have been, as a white man, well paid, and while the job for me has been enriching, I see the profession that I loved being systematically undermined. And I feel a moral obligation to be on the picket line. I cannot not be on the picket line given what is happening. But what bemuses me and confuses me sometimes is, why do our vice-chancellors and principals not feel the same? They are not the owners of our universities, they are the custodians of our universities. And their responsibility is to hand over the university system in good shape for the future, to make sure it's a decent profession, with people happy and able and time to think, so they can educate their students well, and so they can do the work which allows them to contribute to society. That's their job, that's their moral obligation. They shouldn't be fighting us in this. They shouldn't be fighting us and siding with USS in undermining our pensions. They should be fighting with us for the system, because we're not just fighting for ourselves. We are fighting for our profession, for our future, for our students, and for our contribution to society. And so I invite my own Vice-Chancellor and Principal onto the picket line, Sally Mapstone. And all of us can invite all the others: Andrew Atherton, Peter Mattison, George Boyne, Pamela Gillies, John Harper, Nigel Seaton, and all the rest. They should be on the picket line fighting with us for a decent pension for our staff. They, like me, should be ashamed at the differentials based on gender and based on race. In 2021, the racism and the sexism that pervades our system, they should find it as intolerable as I do. They should be with us on those picket lines. And if they were, we would win this fight so much more easily, without any disruption, without missing classes, because we hate missing those classes. We find it painful and difficult. And if there is disruption, it's because they are sitting in their offices, fighting against us, fighting against the fight to preserve the profession and not working with us. So let's have an end to disruption to students. Let's have decent pensions. Let's have a decent profession, and let's do it through the Vice-Chancellors doing what they should be morally obliged to do, and join us who are acting on that moral obligation and fighting for the system.
Thank you, Steve, for that really powerful and empowering contribution. I think it's so important for all of us to have you standing here with us on the picket lines on our virtual rally. Thank you, and solidarity to you too. So pleased to see so many people joining our rally, and all the supportive comments. I can see Steve's contribution went down really well on Facebook and YouTube, and the really positive comments and thanks that Matt's getting in his really powerful contribution as well. Just to cover a couple more of the messages of solidarity that we've received from other trade unions. First of all, from the NUS Scotland, they send solidarity to colleagues in UCU as we begin our action in pursuit of fair pay, pensions and working conditions. We've also been really appreciative of the support we've received from the Communication Workers Union here in Scotland. We've received support from the CWU Scotland region for us to remain resolute in our fight against poor pay, unsafe working conditions and inferior pensions. And support from their branches in Edinburgh, Dundee and the Borders, and wishing us well in our campaign. So thank you to all of our sister trade unions. It really does mean a lot to have that support and solidarity. And in that vein, I think it's really good now to bring on Dave Moxham. Dave is the Deputy General Secretary of the Scottish Trade Union Congress. And I know Dave was out very early on the Glasgow University picket lines yesterday. So thank you, Dave. We're really delighted that you're here today to bring solidarity from across the movement. So over to you.
Thanks very much indeed, Mary, and apologies from Ros Foyer, our General Secretary, who as you imply, Mary was out with me early at Glasgow University picket line yesterday, but had something that she couldn't move today. But as soon as we'd finished the picket line at Glasgow University, we were back to the STUC's General Council, which meets monthly and coincided with the first day of your strike. And I can say, and it's in the same vein as the messages of support that you've had coming in from around the movement, that our General Council, the 40 trade unions that the STUC represents, and I'm sure all of the trades councils, are in absolute solidarity with you. And I couldn't think of a better way of explaining why than listening to Steve Riker's contribution just before us. But, you know, this does go beyond trade union solidarity in the sense that we always show it. I think that trade unionists across the country are absolutely clear that an attack, particularly in a sector such as higher education, which should be an exemplar, should be seen as a public sector exemplar of an institution, that attack on pensions, attacks on pay, attacks on working conditions there have an impact for all of us all over the country and in all sorts of different workplaces. In that real practical sense, an attack on one is an attack on all. And I guess that's particularly sharp with respect to some of our affiliates, our campaigning organisations like Better Than Zero, who are fighting in what should be far more difficult sectors against precarious employment, against 0 hours contracts, against the kind of insecurity that we shouldn't expect to see, but do see in your sector. So again, absolutely critical, I think, that part of your campaign is about the terms and conditions of people who aren't in any way enjoying the kind of job security that you and everybody else so richly deserves. But the third reason, I think, to draw out particularly as to why you're getting so much support from across the movement is there is a recognition that higher education has a critical role. That role is often, in my view, sometimes too often framed in economic terms, but it is economically important. But far more importantly than that, it's for the development of people, it's for people's futures, it's for their opportunities, and it's for tackling some of the key crises and key challenges that we have coming forward, including climate change. And if we don't have an optimum and accessible higher education system, then we will be so much poorer, not just in financial terms, but in terms of those real people resources that we need. And for that, we need respected staff, we need secure staff, we need staff across the movement, not just lecturers, but every single area of university delivery, who are able to enjoy the sort of security and space to think that Steve talked about. So that's why this is a struggle for all of us. It's why I have no doubt that you'll see us on the picket lines until you win, that those messages of support will continue to come in, and the solidarity of people across Scotland will be with you. So best wishes for tomorrow. I hope we see you down there, and best wishes for the next phase of the campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. That was brilliant to hear from you and to get the whole solidarity from the Scottish trade union movement. We do really value that, so thanks. Before I go to our final speaker, just to mention again, it's so good to have so many people joining us live right here. And this live stream will be available to watch again, so please do share it with your colleagues and comrades. You know, I think it's been a really inspiring session today, and so just to say, you will be able to watch it again, and to mention some of the other messages of support that we've received from politicians. So Monica Lennon, a Labour MSP, has sent her best wishes to UCU members. Pam Duncan-Glancy, MSP, has tweeted her support, and she shared a letter that she sent to the principal at the University of Glasgow. I've also seen really strong messages of support, and actually I had a chat with him on the picket lines at Glasgow University yesterday from Richard Leonard, MSP. You know, he fully behind UCU's campaign. I also know know that Chris Stevens, MP, sent in a message of support last night, and I think Chris is planning to come along to the Glasgow University picket lines tomorrow, which is good news, as is MP Thomas Shepherd is planning to get to the Edinburgh University picket lines tomorrow. Both of those are MPs, so I guess they're in Parliament today, which is why they weren't able to get there today. So thank you for those messages. I think it means a lot to us to know that our political representatives are supporting us. And I would also encourage, if you haven't heard from your MSP, send them an email, make sure they know why you're on strike. They've received the UCU briefing, so please get them to support our disputes. I'll now move to our final speaker, who is Vivek Santanya. And Vivek is the Vice President of the UCU Edinburgh branch. And he's going to really speak to us about experiences of early careers and casualised staff. So thanks again, Vivek, for coming along. So I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Mary. Hi, everyone. My name is Vivek Santayana, and I'm a casualised researcher at Edinburgh University. And on Monday and Tuesday, I was supporting some members through casework. And these were members who have been teaching since September. And some of them haven't been paid or issued contracts or even given a staff card to access the very buildings in which they teach until the end of semester. And this is just atrocious. And if it's any indication of how much contempt casualised staff and early career staff are held by university management, in response to a very direct question about why is it that despite the increased costs of living, despite inflation, staff pay has not risen in proportion and staff have experienced a real-time pay cut, the Vice-Chancellor at Edinburgh University responded by saying that the prestige of working at the University of Edinburgh is something that a lot of people compete for, and there are other rewards besides just pay that staff should be satisfied with. Now, this is rank hypocrisy coming from somebody who is paid £1,000 a day to then say, well, you shouldn't be concerned about pay because this work is its own reward. And on top of that, this was just a couple of weeks after one of the vice principals of our university went as far as to say that the university has even bigger surpluses than they previously anticipated because of the fantastic news of the pension cuts that they've been making. And all of this just goes to show that this entire sector is as financially solvent as it is morally bankrupt. And I know it's hard to see in the charisma of carrying out a picket line or speaking in front of Parliament, but every day after a picket, I come back home and, like, hiding behind my pile of laundry, I cry over the state of our sector, my lack of future in this sector, and just the pain all of us go through. But despite what happens at the dead of winter, despite us being on strike, I still show up at 8 a.m. at the graveyard shift for the picket every morning, because every morning I see my comrades at picket lines, and some of whom are too precarious to go on strike or fight for their own rights because they're migrants or casualized. And it is in these spaces that I see some of the radical kindness and solidarity and compassion and the values that we as a union fight for, that education isn't a commodity for us to treat students as customers. It is a public good from which everyone benefits. And the discussions that come out of this have inspired me. There have been teach-outs at the strike and industrial action where issues around casualisation have been raised, where we interrogated the transphobia at university campuses, or what it means to decolonize the curriculum. And we've resisted the hostile environment. And it is from these conversations and teach-outs that we have built campaigns to protect some of the most vulnerable people in the university sector. And this goes to show that it is we on the picket lines who have the real values of what education should be about. It is we on the picket lines who care about the future of higher education. And it is we on the picket lines who have been building this movement throughout the course of the action, but also the run-up to it and the discussions we have in between. And when I first started out in this union, I used to think that the strikes were built on hope and optimism. But seeing the kind of solidarity and the kindness and compassion and the radicalism that all my comrades bring, I've come to realize that it is these strikes and these actions that inspire hope. And it is this hope and these values that we cling to that allow us to fight for a better future in higher education. And it is this hope that will allow us to hold the line and win these disputes. Because every time the university reneges on its agreement, every time we're made to fight for our own rights, we fight back stronger and more motivated than ever before. And we've always seen some of the most compassionate and kind and radical people at our strikes. And my only hope is that this can only grow until our movement is one that will truly have no equal in the higher education sector. And the callousness and contempt of our management at the universities will not hold a candle to the kindness and radicalism and the compassion that we bring to our work and to our students. In solidarity at every picket line and ever since, I will always be indebted to all my comrades.
Thank you, Vivek. I think we'll forever be indebted to you too. That was an incredibly powerful and inspiring contribution, and you're getting a lot of support in the chat and the comments on Facebook and YouTube, because you absolutely nailed it. This morally bankrupt sector, which you know, is based on the exploitation of hardworking staff in the sector. Thank you, Vivek. That was a brilliant contribution. And thank you, everybody, and well done, everybody. We've seen phenomenal picket lines yet again in Scotland, in St Andrews, in Stirling, Dundee, through in Heriot-Watt and Edinburgh and Queen Margaret. Their singing yesterday really inspired us on the virtual picket lines. And over in Glasgow, Glasgow University and Glasgow School of Art, and not forgetting our comrades in the Open University in Scotland. Great to see you on the picket lines in Edinburgh too. I think today, this lunchtime has been really inspiring to remind us what we're fighting for in these two disputes. To save our pensions, to get the employers to rescind these swinging cuts that they're imposing upon our pensions, and for decency in the workplace, to roll back the 20% cut in pay that we've endured over these past 12 years, for safe workloads, an end to the spiraling out of control precarity that we're seeing, and for fair pay. So thank you, everybody. If you haven't already, I just wanted to remind you of all of the information that's available on the UCU website. If you haven't been on our USS modelers or our pay modelers, please do check them out. Please do share them with your colleagues, so they can see that the terrible threat to their pensions, and to see how their pay has declined, to see what they actually should be earning if pay had kept up with inflation. So please use the resources on our websites. At the HE disputes link, you'll find all the frequently asked questions relating to being on strike, to action short of strike, and to where we're going next. But colleagues, I just want to thank all of the people that have spoken from the platform today. I think it's been really inspiring, and I can see everybody's comments have found this invigorating and empowering too. So thank you to all of them, to the politicians, to Matt Crilly, to Steve Riker, to Dave Moxham, and to Vivek from our Edinburgh branch. Such powerful stuff. We're back again tomorrow on the picket lines for our final day this year. Please give some support to the branches in Scotland where the reballot will open on Monday. Got a number of branches who didn't quite make it first time, and the ballot there opens again on Monday and closes on the 14th of January. So good luck to those branches. We want them to be with us in this fight, because that will help us to win. I think today has shown we can win. you know, right is on our side. So thanks everyone for joining. Thanks to the speakers, and stay safe and all the best for the picket lines tomorrow, colleagues. Thank you.